Welcome, everybody. Today is the Medical XR Day of XR Safety Awareness Month. And with me today is Amy Hedrick, the CEO of Cleanbox Technologies. I am really delighted to be able to present this to you, and together we are going to dive into something really important. How do we have to prepare for the pandemic, for XR safety in a post-pandemic world? So I welcome you all. This is going to be about 50 minutes to an hour session where we're going to dive into some of the safety aspects of what is currently going on in the world and how do we go to the next phase of life as we come out of this pandemic. And today is dedicated to awareness in medical XR. So I want to start with a high level perspective on some of the immediate medical XR concerns. But before I do that, let me go over to Amy just to introduce herself. So Amy, please introduce yourself and, tell us a reflection on what are we about to talk about and your experience in this field.
Thank you, Kavya. It's really great to be here. Thank you for having me. And we were chatting shortly before we went live here about how exciting it is for me to be having this conversation, for both of us to be having the conversation around mitigating risk and safety in a post-COVID world, because it really is indicative of the XR industry becoming so much more than that, really becoming an integral part of businesses and specifically healthcare. So I'm the CEO and co-founder of Cleanbox Technology. We're a smart tech hygiene company. We provide medical grade hygiene using UVC proprietary engineering. And we also have data tracking components and hygiene tracking. And really, I started this business with my founder with the intention of mitigating risk, looking at any of those barriers of entry to having XR as a full solution and making the most of it, and what would be the barriers that would prevent businesses or industries from really taking full advantage. So hygiene and risk mitigation and really operational logistics was a very big part of that thought process in the beginning. And so this is why we founded Cleanbox. And so thank you for having me and allowing that introduction.
Thank you, Amy. And we'll definitely dive into a lot more into, how you got into it, what went into it eventually. But yeah, it's so great to be here. And just about myself, I'm Kavya Pearlman. I am the founder of XR Safety Initiative, the organization behind this XR Safety Awareness Week. We are basically, we found ourselves at this cross section where we have the ability to do this sort of an inception of an idea of how critical safety is at the crossroads that we are in. We're about to, discover, we were about to get vaccinated for COVID-19. We have this sort of a mass adoption of XR that's taking place due to, mental health issues and reduction in the cost of headsets and just the dire need for these technologies to be available. So we could be together, but yet be apart for the time being. But then there is the other important conversation that we are at the cross section of how do we go back safely to what used to be the normal. So we would have to discover the new normal. During my time, like before XR Safety Initiative, I have been head of security for an oldest existing virtual world. You might know Second Life. The makers of Second Life, Linden Lab, is what I worked for prior to this. And even before that, I found myself in a very interesting position in 2016 doing third-party security for Facebook. So collectively, some of my experience, but more importantly, what really gives me hope is this interdisciplinary I would call the, group of real experts in the medical, cybersecurity, privacy in this field that we've put together and formed a medical XR advisory council. I actually have the honor of having Rachel in the audience right now. She is the lead of Medical XR Advisory Council. So I encourage you to stick around if you're in Ward and have a chat with her later on and myself, and we can definitely dive deeper into what we do at the Medical XR Advisory Council. But mainly, try to build standards and try to create this exact same thing is guidelines, sort of a prescription for what is to come, how to proactively anticipate these risks. And for us, safety is a well-rounded thing. It's not just, it's not just about physical safety. It's not just about cleanliness. It goes way beyond. So I'm just really delighted to have Amy right here, where I could actually give the zoomed out perspective, but then we're going to zoom into this hygiene thing as well as the risk mitigation and potentially learn from Amy, what does she recommend that we need to do to get back to that sort of new normal? So let's go to the next slide. So today, as I said, is dedicated to awareness in medical XR. So I want to start with a high-level perspective. As I said, we'll zoom out. Some of the immediate medical XR concerns as we have discovered at the Medical XR Council. So our primary concern, guess what? It's safety. Since the attack surface of XR goes way beyond just the device and the network, we believe safety is everything, cybersecurity, safety of your data, our surroundings, and even our brain. A simple example of safety could be preventing motion sickness due to transitioning, disorienting, collision with real-world objects, confusion with different style, accelerating controls, etc. And then there is the hygiene, where, XR devices have always been sort of a target of and topic of hygiene because you go to a conference, you can exchange the headset. Nobody would have thought even twice about okay, maybe put a layer of some kind of a clothing there. But now the level of hygiene has to be really considered very carefully because in the post-COVID world, we will it would be more important than ever that we make sure that we have proper cleaning procedure, place to ensure that your customers are not only protected but have full trust in your facilities and your staff. So things we are immediately concerned about beyond just hygiene is compatibility. So being able to concurrently use XR equipments from multiple vendors, important for procurement process for medical XR organizations. Authentication, so like manual login of each student in a classroom could be inefficient if you're teaching a class of doctors or nurses. So the authentication needs to be seamless. But if you're doing the eye tracking authentication, then the issue of security and safety of that data comes into being. So all of these things are very interesting and immediate concern. Authorization, so assigning roles between the sessions, between the role-based access, interoperability. I mean, there's already been talk about, previously when I was in grad school, I did my master's in network security, and one of my projects was body area network and how to hack those. So we already know that, people can hack and there's an interference between the devices, the electromagnetic signal. What does that mean for XR is also very interesting here. And then with that, I'm going to hand over to Amy, because Amy, you can talk about the safety from a more zoomed in perspective into hygiene aspects. So I'm going to hand this over to you. Take it away, Amy.
Thank you, Kavya. Safety is clearly an important, one of the most important parts of the whole experience. And you brought up a lot of really good points about the various factors that come into safety. What does that actually mean to have safety in XR? So since I'm dialing in specific to hygiene, that is our expertise. So as we all know, we're sitting here with something that's very, very personal sitting on our heads and in our hands. And this is a personal piece of electronics that is very, very close to you see eyes, nose, and mouth. And really thinking about the fact that we're going to be in this for at least an hour in this presentation, that's a lot of time. And so you think specifically to the hygiene points, you have to think about what is this, what am I transferring if I'm sick today or somebody next to me is sick? How are we going to take that into consideration when we're looking to deploy this in a healthcare scenario, for example? So I can't, I'm a little bit too close to the screen to see each of the slides up here, but what we do is CleanBox provides hygiene at a hospital grade acceptance level. That's generally logs 5 and greater. If you are familiar with log kill, that's 99.999% decontamination. And the way we do it specifically is using UVC light. Now, the use of UVC light is not new. It's been used in healthcare for decades. It was actually discovered light was discovered to impact contagions, in the 1800s. So, but the way we use it is in an LED. Now, traditionally, it's been used in mercury tubes or bulbs, and we do it a little bit differently because we are able to eliminate any kind of ozone emission with the nanometer wavelength that we choose, as well as eliminate any heat and other hazardous waste materials. So we do, all of our products use UVC LEDs. Our engineering is designed such that we have an overlap in radius of lights. So if you understand UVC technology, you know that UVC light is a very short wavelength. It's also a line of sight technology. So if, for example, you see some of our products up here, if you're targeting, here's this first one up here, our CX series, where you have a VR headset in there. The light needs to be able to reach all of the areas that you need to target for decontamination. The most important on your headset right now is what's touching your eyes, and sitting on your nose, and of course in proximity to the breath that you're breathing. And so that's what we use. We use UVC light. We have an overlap in radius of light so that there are no shadows. If you have shadows, of course, there's a chance that a contagion could live. Let me just backtrack a little bit in case you don't know why UVC light works. What it does is it disrupts DNA and RNA strands, and so it renders them unable to replicate, and then they are no longer a contagion. So it is important that when you do that, and when you use UVC light, you do it with maximum efficacy. So we've had all of our products tested on a number of contagions. COVID-19, of course, is one that we have tested on. We have a product that decontaminates N95 masks. And it was important for us to validate that in a biohazard level 3 lab. So we did validate that on multiple layers of an N95 mask. We've tested on MRSA, SARS, H1N1. MRSA actually is, as you could imagine, more difficult to kill even than a virus on a surface. So we have validated all of our products on a lot of different contagions. And, so coming down to, Kavya, one thing that you mentioned earlier, how do we get people not only using this technology, but coming back into a post-COVID world? How do you get them to feel comfortable about it? Well, one way is to reassure them that whatever hygiene protocol you have in place is actually effective. So it's important to be able to say, hey, here's the science. Here's why it works. Here's what we're doing as a business or organization or healthcare provider to protect you, our client or patient or consumer. And then there's also just the psychological component, I think, to that as well. When someone is convinced that you've done the right thing from the outset, they're going to trust everything else, generally speaking, that you bring to them. So for a lot of our clients, we've seen that they've used our technology actually to market how safe it is for what they're doing in XR. So, for example, they'll put it front and center, and they'll do marketing around it and Instagram even. And in hospitals, sometimes they'll have big posters that say, "Hey, we use CleanBox because it's proven to kill these contagions." From the outset, they're letting that end consumer know that they've taken all the necessary steps to protect them. And that's dealing with the psychological component of coming back into XR and a very personable technology in a post-COVID world. So with that being said, I'm talking a lot. I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody has one. If not, I'll turn it over to you, Kavya.
Yeah, no, thanks for that. Was a very quick review. So, I definitely want to follow that up with various different questions. And
Sure.
I feel like we should even include our audiences in right on the outset, because generally there's very little time left towards the end. And I see people are already lining up. So if I can actually unmute. I believe, Connor, if you have a question, I see that you're standing at the question mark. You can unmute yourself and ask question.
Yeah, thank you. This is the first time I've seen this, and actually it's kind of something I've been waiting for, because pre-COVID, I had made an investment in headsets so that I can go out to festivals and promote VR. Then we know what happened. So is CleanBox ideal for like smaller independent, or is this just medical business type of clientele that you normally work with?
That's a great question. Thank you for asking that. We actually work with a broad range of industries. So CleanBox was a first to market company in this particular space. And so because of that, we are very fortunate to have clients in entertainment, healthcare, education, government, basically any kind of organization that uses a head-mounted display of any kind. So if you're using a VR headset or an AR or a mixed reality, or even broadcaster headsets, we work very, very well with all of those types of applications. Our products are, we came at it from, if you maybe to answer this question better, Kavya, could I give a little bit of history on why we came with this solution?
Absolutely.
So my co-founder and I both have backgrounds and have previously worked in content creation and storytelling and immersive platforms of various types. And so we understand, we've also worked on the operations side of things. So for us, the best experience is one where you forget that you're actually having an experience. You're just having it, right? As opposed to being an onlooker, and really thinking about what would make it the simplest, both for the person that's getting the story or the experience, as well as the organization that's telling it. So all of our products have been designed to be easy to use, a kind of dummy proof, if you will, if I can say that, where you hang it, you close the door, push the button, and it does the work for you. Our products are lightweight, they're easy to move around, they're portable, and we've tried to think of every type of solution that would be really, really useful for people. So I hope that helps to answer your question. Our CX1, that we have 3 product lines, and they each address different kinds of needs, all in the hygiene space, of course.
Wonderful. And I see that, Rachel, you have some question. I believe you're megaphoned in already, so go for it.
Great. How long does a UVC light take to disinfect, let's say, a mask or a headset? Just ballpark, so that we can see like what kind of protocols could be built around this. Like this, is this an overnight thing, or is this several times a day that we can do this?
That's a great question. I should have probably mentioned that before. All of our products, except for Clean Defense, they operate at a 1-minute cycle. We're able to reach log 5 and greater in a 1-minute cycle. On a mask, because there are multiple layers, we run a 2-minute cycle. We have eradicated COVID at acceptable, well, completely eradicated it in under 2 minutes. So the 2-minute mark is our safety mark for masks because there are multiple layers and you're wearing it over your mouth. But all of our other products are 1-minute cycles. And that makes it a lot easier to use throughout the day. And so, for example, if you have a venue, like you had mentioned, you invested in HMDs, and you have 100 people coming through, every single time a person uses that headset, you can disinfect it right after. So you're really reducing your risk significantly because you're eliminating those contagion transfers. If something were to happen, that it's not going to be happening because of your headset or even your controllers. So our products have adapters as well for the controllers here, as well as other types of equipment that you might be using, gloves and all sorts of fun haptics that are coming into play in the XR space.
That is incredible.
Thank
And that
you.
time is really remarkable. Thank you, Rachel, for that question. And timing is really remarkable for this product to be, widely available. In terms of like the adoption of it, you must have seen like a tremendous increase in sales, don't you think?
Well, yes, I would say, the good thing is that CleanBox was here before COVID. So we had already gone through our R&D process. We'd validated, lab tested all of our products, our engineering, we'd refined that. So that was fortunate for us because we had really done the hard work already. So when COVID came, yes, we were extremely busy. We were, I would say, in maybe 10, 12 countries before. We're in 38 now.
Wow.
But a lot of that growth was organic already. I think what COVID did really was just make us hyper aware. Now, instead of just some operators having to be aware of hygiene and thinking about it in terms of risk mitigation, everybody in the world, from grandparents to toddlers to operators, everybody has had to think about hygiene and think about all the invisible things that when we don't see germs, sometimes it's very, very easy to forget about them. So yes, it's been a very busy year for us, and we've worked really hard to provide products in a timely way so that people can actually reopen their businesses.
That is remarkable. Thank you, Amy, for all that you're doing. And I actually, as you're talking, it reminds me of the scenarios that myself and Rachel Michelson, who's lead of Medical XR Council, her expertise is also in cybersecurity. And together we talk about it all the time, where when the breach happens, when the data breach happens, all the dollar amount starts to flow in. It's a blessing in disguise for some of the people who, people like myself who've had to stay on the out front of these cyber attacks, and then immediately everybody becomes hyper vigilant about any kind of phishing. Do not click here. Immediately money starts flowing in for these kind of people make budgeting consideration for cybersecurity, and here we have it is a true parallel to once people are more aware, then they know where to make the investment. Don't you think it's like such a
Absolutely.
And
Yeah,
on
no,
that note,
yeah,
go for it.
go ahead.
Yeah, and on that note, I wanted to ask you, yes, there is that parallel of, data loss and stuff. And you earlier said monitoring of these, who is able to, or monitoring some of the contamination procedures and how intrusive does it get? Like, what level of monitoring can we get out of these products?
For CleanBox products, one thing that, it's interesting because you were talking about a data breach, and so I'll make that hardware parallel. And so one thing that we've really realized is really important is to understand how often and make sure that whatever hardware you're using, exactly when it was last cleaned. So part of what we've built into our products now is the ability to hygiene track any object. So our latest series, the Star series, our first product in that is the OmniClean. The OmniClean is basically a circular well with a rotating quartz plate and reflective surfaces, and it has over 30 lights. And that's important because we have quartz is one of the few substances that UVC light can penetrate through. So you're able to have something sit on that quartz plate and have full decontamination without any shadows. And then anything you put in there, we utilize RFID tagging to track the hygiene history of any object. So a stethoscope or a cell phone that you check in, or a lavalier microphone, or your security and kind of security pieces that you wear, earphones, so on and so forth. And you can make sure that every single time you put that on, you can check your app, or you can go to the web portal and say, okay, this piece of equipment was last cleaned 15 minutes ago, or it was last cleaned 3 days ago. I'm not going to put this on. And in a sense, that's the same. It's that like that last barrier of protection, so that you as a consumer can say, you can double check, you can double verify that you're actually being protected, which I think is important.
Yeah, that is absolutely. And it is important to be able to track, and outside of, because some of the time that's another challenge that, we're looking into at XRSI is being able to monitor where these devices are. Because in a traditional
Right.
IT environment, we have the, MDMs or inventory system. And I'm not sure, what kind of inventory system have you seen in general in XR space as you are more close to the hardware side of things?
Well, in terms of inventory systems for what, building out your space, or
For tracking these devices basically, because for IT you can pretty much put a serial
Sure.
number and that kind of stuff. So how does that even work with XR headsets?
Well, that's a good question. For our products, all of our products have our products themselves. We have 5 products on the market now. They all, of course, have serial numbers, and we can, identify which client has, 5 CX1s and 30 Omnis, and we can say this particular Omni number 29. But we use RFID tagging. So it's so if I say I want to clean these 2 pieces of equipment and this HMD, each particular HMD will have a tag assigned to it. So let's say you have 100 HMDs. Every single one you can track individually, and that automatically records that data when you put it in any one of our products. So in that sense, although the purpose of that tagging is different than tracking, necessarily the hardware, it's more tracking the hardware's hygiene history, but it also serves a dual purpose, I suppose, in that way.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that fully answered your question, but hopefully that was helpful.
Yeah, and I was just really curious about, the tracking of, let's say I put these 2 hand controllers that I have, although I don't see any tracking number on it. So how would I, as a person who is about to touch these things, would know from the upfront, like whether
Sure.
it has been cleaned or not? How are you tracking these things?
RFID tagging. So basically, we have these very, very small stickers. They're RFID track stickers. They'll have either their RFID tagging inside them. And let's just say you put one on a controller. It lives there. It's very innocuous. You don't really see it, but it lives there. And as soon as you come in proximity and you open up the unit and you put it in, it will track that immediately. It connects that data going into the clean box, whichever clean box it is. And then immediately that data is transferred to your web portal. So at the same time you're putting in this controller right here, I can be looking on my laptop over here and see, oh, you know what, Kavya just put her right hand controller in, and she just also put HMD number 500 in. And so and then I can tell her that, and and I can show you if you need to actually see the evidence that's happening. Another interesting component of this, and I don't know that a lot of people are using it this way yet, but I think that they will, is the ability to, especially when it comes to a company that's using this either for the public or for their direct employees. It's a way to come back to your insurance company and say, it's not only safe for me to be using this equipment right now, but here's how we know. And you can come back and actually probably find a lot of use on the insurance side of things. That's when it comes back to the risk mitigation part.
Excellent. And thank you for that deep dive into how that RFID even works. And it's
Yes.
wonderful. So it seems like we're going to start to see, you know, how you have OK tested, this is like clean box cleaned, and the logos are like
Yes.
kind of seal of trust in that sense.
Yes. Yes, that is really what we've worked hard to build, is that, create a brand that it can be trusted. So you're clean box clean. And if someone says, "Oh, are you clean box clean?" you know what that means, and that means that it's been validated, and you know that the lights have been certified, and you know that you can actually track that history. And that's really what we've been working very, very hard to provide for people.
That's excellent. And so you just mentioned certification, and here at XRSI, we are working hard to build guidelines, build standards, and going all the way to some of the regulatory at the global level, regulatory bodies, to educate them what XR means, what are the safety, cybersecurity, privacy risks that are relevant to XR. So in terms of hygiene, what are the potential standards? And then what should we be aware of? People who are looking to, let's say maybe standardize their own products, or are there any other competitors in the space? So how do we know what's valid or what's the best thing to adopt? Besides just, it being clean box, are there any regulatory bodies that do that, or what's the process thus far?
Well, I think that's a bit that's still in development. I think that that's still quite a fluid conversation. And actually, this going back to what was just on the screen a minute ago, was a set of best practices that we actually built with VR Studios, which is location-based entertainment company, so that there was a more regulated, if you will, or there was a standard that people could use, individual vendors and individual companies could use and say, here's a standard that a VR body has suggested is good protocol. I know we've also gone through protocol process with AIXR, which is, of course, I'm sure you're part of as well. And so, to be honest, because with a lack of regulatory guidance in a lot of ways, there have been individual groups in the communities that have begun to use best practices and integrate those. Now, when it comes to UVC light itself, we know how effective it is. UVC can mean a lot of things. And so what we're trying to do, of course, I can talk about our product all day long and say this is the best product out there, but it's better for me to educate you and say, here's what you need to know about how UVC works. And you could check out the products that are on the market. And I know that there's nothing that's directly competitive in terms of that, but I would rather you know how UVC light works. And then you can say, okay, this makes a lot of sense.
Right.
It's worth the investment. I understand where the light has to go. I understand that there has to be math behind, how long a surface is exposed to it, and so on.
Yeah. And that is a really interesting point where, there are just no other competitors at the level that you're operating. And now you mentioned like 38 countries. And so there is this lot of native knowledge that you're accumulating, which, obviously groups like XRSI, AIXR obviously are interested in. And hopefully, this is an area that we would look to develop standards, and we'll be soliciting your knowledge to input that. Another group that I heard of you're working with is Bob Fine, IVRA.
Yes, IVRA, yes.
Right? Has there been any progress in terms of guidelines and standards? And because, we are also kind of trying to find out whether we can put some guidelines and standards in that place as well.
I think that, yes, IVRA, International Virtual Reality Healthcare Association, which is quite the mouthful, but in case anyone's listening in and doesn't know what IVRA is, yes, I think it's a body of healthcare professionals that are active in the XR space. And so, as with everything else in healthcare, everyone wants it to be validated. And I think when it comes back to the progress that we're making, it really comes back into that educational component. This is what we've tried to help contribute to IVRA. And I know that Bob has been working on, other input as well. So, it's really a collective set of data so that people people can feel confident that it's not just, marketing, and it's not just one company, but it's actually based on real science that's been validated and supported by that community. That being said, it takes some time to build those processes, but I think the standards that you can observe in other industries are fairly applicable when it comes back into specifically into healthcare, except for healthcare is usually a little bit higher of a standard. And I think the IVRA community has been very very, very proactive in putting their knowledge base out there. We try to contribute to that as well.
Yeah, Bob is doing a remarkable job bringing in the people who are in the medical XR space, because there is this cross section happening where a lot of the people who are in the IT or gaming or the technology side, but not necessarily medical side. And so people are going back and forth between the two domains, and this is kind of merging. And that's why it is good to see this cross, function, interdisciplinary group that's paying attention to both sides. And then we are happy to be partnered with them because we try to not replicate what everybody is doing or not compete, but mostly collaborate. So there is so much that we are learning from International Virtual Reality Healthcare Association. Yes, it's a mouthful. But every time, but IVRA helps to remember that. Amy, I see your bio that you submitted, and there is a lot of remarkable things that you've achieved. You've been nominated for an award as well as some of the top women in the technology space. Let's talk a little bit about you in general, because I see you as the leader, as the person who is really trying to change the way we perceive hygiene and safety and the risk management. How did your journey begin, and what has been it so far? How has it been so far?
Well, it was a journey that really, it's an interesting journey, I can say that much. And it's really come from, again, coming back to the idea of what immersive technology can do. Because when you talk about education and learning, healthcare and otherwise, really what's effective is, what sticks. What's that component that causes a subject matter to resonate with an individual and then stay with them as an actual knowledge base. And so really when I started, right before I started Cleanbox, I had a background in content creation and storytelling from an educational point of view, and a very long relationship with the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C. And and then separate from that, I was writing for a think tank, bespoke research, C-suite research on changes in technology, and really observing what was happening and trying, to say, hey, here's what I think is going to happen in the next 5 years. Here's where technology has grown, and seeing VR and AR really get to the point where I felt that they were more adoptable now by industries. The tech maybe caught up a little bit with the vision, to the point that they could actually be executing really great programs that businesses could, and not just have it more of a niche market or more just a group of people who were already gamers understanding the space. And that was really the beginning of my journey, is looking at it from that place. Thinking about the Smithsonian, and they have 30 million people that walk through their facilities every year in DC, and thinking again about barriers of entry, what would prevent a successful use of XR to tell some of those, they have 155 million objects in their possession. So how many, you can only ever physically display 1%. Think of all the stories that are not being actively shared with people. And then also thinking about how immersive technology can reach a different type of audience, a different age group. Kids don't necessarily read a plaque, or reading a book might not be the first thing an 8-year-old does or a 6-year-old does, but they certainly know how to tap into an iPad, right? You put a headset on them, and even if they've never done VR before, they'll probably figure it out before you did. So that was really the beginning of the journey, and then coming back to what would stop us from being able to do this, and that's where hygiene and risk mitigation came in.
Wonderful. And I see that Rachel here has another question. Rachel, I believe your microphone in. Please,
Yes. My question is actually a little bit of a personal one. I have cousins that are in the medical field, and they have their favorite masks, and they have masks that they hate. So I would imagine they would want to disinfect the ones that they like. How can they get in touch with you and be able to find out more about your product and see if they can come up with a protocol and start using your equipment?
Yeah, I would love for them to reach out. You can find me on LinkedIn, Amy Hedrick, and our website is www.cleanboxtech.com. So the word clean, the word box, tech.com. We're also at Cleanbox Tech is our handle on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. So please have them reach out. Info@cleanboxtech.com is also a way they can get in touch. And if they want to talk to me directly, I would suggest that they message me on LinkedIn because I'm very active there.
Thank
I would love to chat with them.
Great question. Thank you, Rachel. And I've also noticed you give a lot of talks and, spread awareness around the product itself, which is remarkable. But mainly, even when I reached out to you, you were like, no, we need to have this conversation about risk management. And that's why, it's really important to expand it and make it, more strategic. But are there any sort of awareness campaigns that you're planning to do as we move back to this so-called new normal?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, one of them is coming back to education component. One of them is on UVC light and just talking about the science and trying to make it very palatable for literally anyone so that a kid or somebody without, so sometimes I talk about the technology and it's so natural for me to talk about it, then I don't realize that I'm maybe speaking over the person that I'm speaking to. So awareness campaigns really comes down to education. We published a collaborative white paper on UVC and how it and surface disinfection with UVC. Now, we collaborated with Hoag Hospital in Newport Beach, California, Resinova Laboratories, which is a viral and bacteria laboratory testing facility on the East Coast, and Crystal IS, which provides UVC LEDs. And that was really so that anybody could say, hey, I want to understand this about UVC light. What's the history? Or how do you test it in a laboratory? Or, when you validate it, how does that work? And so it's a 29-page piece of collaboration, and there's a lot of information in there. And I would say, future endeavors are really going to try to help people understand how it works, when it works, and what they can, and how and when they can use it. So specific to our company, that is one of the agendas that we have.
That is really good to hear, Amy. And if you permit us, we are putting together, as a part of the XR Safety Awareness Week, there is the page of resources. So we're curating resources from various different, various different sides of XR. So one resource is from, Games for Change. They put out a report on the impact, and that's something that we're going to make it available. So if you have permission from those authors and writers, we would love to highlight that or showcase that in our resource section once the week ends.
Yes, that would be wonderful. Yeah.
Awesome. And then there is another, really important announcement we're about to make. Right after this, we have a panel where we are going to be speaking with some of the leadership from Health Education England, NHS folks. And there is a really significant announcement we're about to make. And, then we have on the same panel people from University of Michigan. So education and awareness is going to be front and center of it. And I would encourage our audiences, our viewers to dial into that conversation. It's again happening at Allspace VR. But before I actually conclude this thing, I want to just go over, you can see on the slide, there are a few things that we have highlighted. These are so much work is done in the research side. Some of the imperatives that, as you leave this session, some of the imperatives that we need to pay attention to in medical XR field is number one, define and streamline leadership, governance, and expectations for the healthcare cybersecurity for the entire industry. Because earlier I mentioned there is this cross-section of cybersecurity, privacy, gaming, and all these aspects. So we really need to define these governance and expectation. Second one is improve medical device health, IT, security, and resilience, where of course hygiene is a huge component of it. Develop necessary workforce, and we're going to be talking about how, what is the key role of that development of workforce capacity, and to prioritize that we are conducting these type of awareness activities and enabling our healthcare workers with technical capabilities so they understand and they know how to do this. Increase industry readiness, exactly what Amy's organization is doing. They're not just focused on let's sell a bunch of devices, but more about how do we prepare the world for this next phase of life, which is quite drastically different than what we are generally used to until we get back to what used to be the normal. And preparing mechanisms in place for research and development and efforts around intellectual property attacks and exposures. And finally, improving data sharing, because that's really what the point of all of these collaborations with, IVRHA or WEE or HEE or all these organizations is to exchange knowledge, because we don't have those threat intelligence groups formally in place, but there is this, collective of collaborative organizations that are popping up. So in the end, I really just want to thank you, Amy, and ask you if you have any parting message for our viewers about awareness, about safety.
Thank you so much, Kavya, for having me. And thank you to the audience who has been here today and might be listening in. I would just say I continue to be excited about this space. As you've mentioned, it's hygiene is an integral part of safety, but so are many other factors. And I, would love to help and the company, in any way that we can as you continue to educate people and be part of that and contribute to that, because it just grows. And as you see these events increasing, and you mentioned way of life becoming very different, it's important that we have all those tools at our disposal and that they're as available as possible. So thanks again for having me today. It's been my pleasure. It's always nice to see you, and I look forward to the next event. And it sounds amazing, the one that's following this one, actually.
Yeah. Thank you, Amy.